Hi, Decoders. This week we're delving into the age-old conundrum, good versus evil. That's a big topic, but let's explore it, shall we? Hi, I'm Kiran Trace. Welcome to Humans Decoded, a story of hobbits, fairies, elves, dwarfs, gnomes, and humans. If you get lost at any point, there is a deep dive on all the different avatars in episode 1. It includes notes. Thank you for joining us in a fun little chat about the vast potential of our human makeup. Hi, Leela. Hi, Cami.
Hi.
Hi, Queens. Hey, Decoders.
I love that we're doing a 40-minute episode on this topic. Like, I spent 7 years at university studying theology. I got a master's in that. It's like, okay, let's see what we can do here. But, I mean, it's always relevant, isn't it? Especially, I don't know, now it feels like the polarity is huge these days. There are like these big evil sort of spikes, but then there's also so much good. And living in this non-dual perspective or lens, I know that's not true. There's no actual polarity, but still I'm informed. So I'm like, so how do I navigate this whole thing again? How is it to be aware of the extremes or the seeming extremes without believing them? And then how do I not get confused there?
Well, sure enough, Leela. I mean, obviously, you can get an entire degree on good versus evil, at minimum a full university course, and we've got 40 minutes today. So we can start to unpack it. And it's fun to explore how people have their own biases. And they're deep and they're subconscious and they filter everything. It's through all their language and action subconsciously. And I always think it's just incredible how nuanced the definitions of what is evil or what is good in each person's system.
Oh my God. I'm excited to be here, as always. I want to hear the takes on all the big stuff. I grew up Catholic, so the devil was a real threat for me, even just to get me to put my pajamas on. It's just like so ubiquitous, like grannies and aunties, like, oh, the devil will get you if you don't. Da, 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 da. But I feel like I never really bought it. So I'd go to church and I'd be like, nah. Even as a 7 or 8 year old, I'd be like, nah, none of this makes sense. Not buying one bit of it. Yeah, and flash forward to now, where it's a very intimate knowing that it's just all light, it's all love, it's all source. How do you not come across like a complete asshole when you say that? Which I don't, but I know.
Sidebar, I love that we are so diverse, the three of us, so we can bring in these different versions of our own wirings. Leela has a theology and good, has a fucking master's degree. Cam grew up in this very Catholic, like Latin American world, and I came back from this very egalitarian, aloof, Canadian, highly educated background. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So, what is it that we're actually talking about when we're saying good versus evil?
Over to Kiran.
Yes.
Take it away.
Kiran, go.
Go. Okay, let's break it down. So, material form, all the forms in your world, by essence, it's all created from source. The source field, the one infinite field of all. That's what all of the material form is an expression of. And And it expresses across this whole wide range of forms, which at one end is like dark and fear-filled, and we call it evil. And at the other end, it's light and clarity and an inspirational uplift, and we call that, good. And in the spectrum of all of this material forms in our lives, these polarities exist. Like someone's house might feel really warm and welcoming and uplifting and spacious, and it's a good house. And another house might feel dark and moody and moldy and haunted, and that's a dark or evil house. Somebody must have been murdered there. The practice of non-duality, which is a practice of non-polarity. Sometimes it's called the middle way, right? Which would be in the middle of the polarities, no polarity. It's really just saying that it's a practice of coming into this one present moment right now. And then in the depth of that present moment, there's a place where it doesn't filter into the category of light or dark. It's before that. So non-duality is this experience of non-separation. So if we're witnessing any kind of form in the moment as just an expression of source, and the plant or the window or the wall, before we separate it into like a good wall, or plants are, good and, mold is evil. Like it's before we layer that story on it is what non-duality is. But we can't leave the duality of material form. So we can be aware and existing and identified with the form before the separation exists, but you're still going to get up and brush your teeth. You're still going to, which might be good, or punch your little brother, which might be bad or evil, And I think that this is a struggle for seekers and practitioners of non-duality, because they're often challenged with, with just the simplicity of navigating a world of material form. When the moment we're at the form level, there's polarity. And if we've been practicing non-polarity, but the second you get off the mat, polarity hits you in the face.
Yep.
And so I tend to invite it as an exploration to recognize that all these polarities in form are these beautiful expressions of source, and they could be good or they could be evil, but regardless of that definition, they're these little helpers to mirror your karma or mirror your baggage. Sometimes I call it the subconscious or deep internal wiring. These good and evil forms appear out of source to mirror your stuff to you. So like if you're experiencing a lot of like fear, dark, bad, evil, maybe the people you connect with, maybe it's the shows you're watching on TV, maybe it's chaos in your own relationships, maybe it's the way your children are interacting, or maybe your children are interacting with rather dark, fear-filled experiences. If this mirror is coming at you, meaning all the material form is this mirror, and it's coming at you with these reflections in the mirror, it's a pointer, and it's pointing to your allegiance to fear, your habit, this subconscious compass in your own system that uses fear as the true north, not reality. Because you are the reflecting surface. So source is mirroring these reflections back to you. So if your allegiance to fear is projecting a reflection, then the question becomes, how can you unravel this subconscious wiring, this habit or compulsion, gravitating you always to fear? And the answer is not to use your mind to start to repress, override, and just focus merely on that which you define as light or clarity filled. Because as soon as you do that, then you are turning things that naturally represent light or clarity to actually become evil or dark. It becomes an arm of control. And control is fear. Fear is at the root of the definition of evil. So you're using this light to work for the dark. That's how things that are light and clarity filled become agents of the dark. We grab them with our control. We take fear and we push it over there. We force a smile on our face and a forced cheerfulness. Happy, happy, happy. My mother was very, very good at that with my little sister. My little sister would be authentically very depressed and moody. And my mother would say, I'll give you $1 for every happy thought you can do.
Aww.
And it seems like it could be a light thing, but it's not. It's fear. It's my mother fearing my sister's depression and harnessing that fear in the shape of control and trying to control her expressions. So she's grabbing this and turning it into dark. I mean, maybe it's not evil, but we're well on the road.
Yeah. Anytime something comes from fear, we're on this road, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. And I have to say, like, I totally get what you're saying, but I'm here in Switzerland. I'm very, very comfortable. I'm very privileged. And I wonder, how would you talk to me if I were living in a war zone? Or somewhere way less privileged?
Yeah. Well, a war zone is a very, very intense opportunity to transform your relationship to fear. You know, there's no easy way to say, I mean, there's no other way to say that, right? Like this is, you know, honestly, it's very, very challenging because it ends up being the act of surrendering. Like you have to surrender, because you're being so bombarded, you know, constantly bombarded. You know, a bomb goes off a block from you and your whole system is just rocked in terror, you know. Even worse, your family is murdered in front of you. You are harmed, or, you know, it's just rocking terror through your system, which is this pure fear. And it's a very slow and very painful process. To me, it's a little bit like water washing away rock. You know, like, how do you surrender when terror is ripping through your system at 170 miles an hour, right? Like that's a pretty fucking huge thing to say. Surrender your terror and see if there's something else here in the deeper reality that's true. I have very little value for this way of learning. And I can say that from the privilege of, like, I was raised in a war zone. I came from incredible violence and ritualistic violence. Like, you know, blow your mind terror was my waking, breathing, living moment. But so personally, I have very, very little value for it. It's too slow. It's too painful. I don't even know that it really gets you to the end goal. I am much more for the delicious, for the yeses, for the, you know, like moving through that system and someone in a war zone. And personally, that's how I transformed. I transformed my inner trauma and terror by the yeses, the effortless, the deliciouses, you know, like, so personally, as a, if we're talking about skillful teaching, suffering is a shit teacher. But I'm not God, I'm not source. And I do notice that God still finds it valuable.
So there you have it. We've got like a few years worth of stuff, master level stuff, in a couple of minutes. Is it too much?
Yeah, right? Is there too much here? Too deep, too soon?
I think that leads us nicely into our little challenge section. Like, why is it such master level stuff? Let's open up that box.
You know, we all stand so heavily in our subconscious good versus evil stories. And they are so deep down, most of us are hardly conscious of most of them, that it becomes such a profound practice to actually go look to the allegiance we have there of what we're defining as good or what we're defining as evil.
That felt like a mic drop moment, like, bam, right to it.
And, you know, I remember the first time I heard Kiran say the world is a mirror, or maybe I read it in her book. I was so deeply offended. It was so offensive. It's like, how the fuck can you tell me that all these people dying in my world are a mirror? What's that supposed to mean? What's that supposed to teach me? And then, you know, here I am now, a couple of years later, almost 10 years later, I can see how this external, in air quotes, is projected from my internal being, not from my mind. And yeah, I just experienced another death recently. My father died. And it was so different from all these other deaths I've experienced before. It's like, it's incredible. Instead of trauma and loss and this shouldn't happen and this isn't fair or this is evil, I have to be on this to prevent it, you know, in the future. It was just incredibly beautiful. It was so loving, his death, and life-giving and amazing, and it inspired much more depth for me. It's like, wow. But when you first hear that the world is a mirror of your inside, it's such a shock.
You know, it's so good for me to hear that, because honestly, I don't get the level of offense. So then I go wandering in with all this directness.
I feel like for me, it was always a nourishing salve to hear about it. Even if I didn't understand it, I just wanted truth. It was like, just gimme. Like, I remember the first couple of times I wandered into the Muji satsang halls, who's a great non-dual teacher, I just passed out. I couldn't, I just passed out. I couldn't hear a word he said, but I was like, I know I'm in the right room. I just want it. Yeah, and same when I was little. I used to say I wanted to be a ballerina, but I always wanted God. I would sit in my swing as a 3-year-old and sing songs to God. Like, that was just the number one thing. Like, truth. I just want God.
It's so sweet. I wonder if these days there's a lot of children being born who are ready for that level of light, you know? They just want God. We have these primal survival systems in us. And that's what's wired to these stories of good, bad, you know? This is a good thing. This is a bad thing. This is light. This is evil. Because it's so hardwired into our psyche, into that survival system, we lean into them to explain why bad things happen.
Yeah, I remember when my mom lost my twin sisters. Like, they were born way too early and they died after 2 weeks. I remember how our neighbors that were deeply religious would say, maybe you didn't pray hard enough, or maybe you don't believe in Jesus enough. It's absurd.
Yeah. I remember riding in the car with my best friend, and we passed a church, and I was like, oh, it's ugly. And she was like, you're going to fall off your bike as punishment.
Yeah. Both of you are pointing to that, right? We deeply believe in punishment. We deeply believe in this judgment from on high, and that defines the actions as good or evil, right? Like, there's a big judge in the sky who says, this is good, this is evil. We can't imagine that a murderer wouldn't be punished by God. You know, like, people really think that without the punishment, well, then everyone's going to do it. That's really weird to me. But it's still this major weapon used by religions, any religions globally, you know. We wield this judgment.
Yeah, and as we're talking, as we're recording, I remember even when Christopher, my partner, died of suicide 10 years ago, that was playing inside of me. I was like, but I'm such a good yogi. How is this happening to me? Because this good versus evil, it's a desperate try to make sense of the world, to make sense of this existence. Like, of course, it's coming from the place of mind or separation, but if there's good and evil, I have these sort of lampposts. I can orient, I have points of reference, I kind of know where I am. And if these categories do not exist, then how the fuck do I orient? How the fuck do I know if I am good or evil? Like, where am I? And I think a really easy example that's super relatable to all of us is food, actually. We all have these deeply, deeply ingrained stories of this is good food and this is certainly bad food.
Sugar is evil. It's evil. White death. Blueberries are good. So good. They're super food.
Yeah, maybe as you're listening, just hear the thoughts in your head about food.
Yeah. As Leela says, that ship runs so deep. I think the problem with defining things as good or evil, well, throughout human history, it's ripe, or maybe I'll say rank with the problem of this. Like, I mean, I can grab any moment in history. The Caucasian nations arrive to the Americas. They look at the indigenous people and they point to them as evil, primitive, dark, dirty. And then they grab this Bible as this weapon against the indigenous people for the next fucking 400 years. So we have something that's being defined as good, the Bible, and it's being weaponized for evil. And like 100 million more examples of this in every single nation's history. In this moment, people are weaponizing, good things against our trans and non-binary people. Oh my God, that the Bible is still being used against gay people is such harm. We harness the light to work for evil. And, we're just to work for our fear, and we head down that road.
Yeah, and everything's so instant and in your face. So it feels like in some ways it takes a lot of courage to actually not take a stance against things, because it feels like it's really pressurized these days.
Yeah, the algorithms, our call out culture, just sort of like rolls fear in a scroll. And to begin with, as humans, we are not great at exposing our fears. Like, hello, decoders, anyone, hold up your, hand if you are walking over shame in this moment, this very moment, we are not good at it.
If you had visuals, you'd see all of us raising our hands right now, by the way.
Yeah. Yep. So if we boil it down like this, if we look at this spectrum of good versus evil, let's just say it was a horizontal line. And at one end of that is, we can all agree, Hitler goes there. Enormous evil, enormous dark, enormous fear. Boom. Very concentrated form of it. And then we go all the way down to the other side, which we would say good. And perhaps here we might use someone like Desmond Tutu or Martin Luther King Jr. And what we see is this willingness to speak clarity and not fear. And what we see is a profound practice. Like with both of these men, we see this inspired, like bring you to your knees awe, because these great men were raised, like born and raised and lived this practice of peace in war zones.
So what I'm hearing is that the actual discernment is not good versus evil, but clarity versus fear. And that's what we should or could or maybe want to train and learn and practice in, whatever circumstances we find ourselves.
I mean, this is a glib example, but McDonald's, given the right timing, it could be the best meal that you've ever had in the world. It's just about context in that moment. Like, is McDonald's true?
Yeah, is it clear? Is it real? It's a big shock for people to realize things that they might label as evil could actually be working for the light.
Do we have examples for that, Kiran, other than McDonald's? Like, I'm thinking about all these discussions I have about, I don't know, being vegan, being vegetarian, and it's so evil to eat all this meat.
If I'm going to talk about evil or use examples, I think a real common one, it's just hugely common across all the nations. For people, it's the misuse of money and power, like companies that exploit their workers to grab huge profits for the shareholders. I just saw this post about Bezos paying $1,000 a month in fines on his landscaping around his house because it's in violation of the state. Meanwhile, his workers can't even get benefits, basic benefits, or a fucking lunch break. But if we wash this entire theory of money and money is evil, we can miss out on how these large profits really often drive good. And it can be the consumers defining what they want to purchase that can really, really impact. We're seeing this right now with Target, obviously, and Walmart. Huge shifts in their budget based on people boycotting them. And it has an impact. There's enormous public pressure for governments and private companies to move to green and renewable resources for energy. Now, this is not economically profitable since we don't have any infrastructure for this. So we have to dig for the minerals to create the renewable, infrastructure. We have to solve nuclear waste storage. Wind power generators currently have a very short lifespan. We didn't put any systems in place for this upgrade, and certainly not the kind of energy that is required in our very near future to power AI. Petroleum products is where we invested in the infrastructure and the excess supply and the enormous profits. But the consumer voice has built up so loud to say no. And therefore, there is the turning to renewables and beginning to build infrastructure for that demand. And it's the global warming story that just pressurized these very large companies. The transition is expensive, and there's no clear, definable infrastructure even to this point of what would be there. Like the transition into renewables for a future that needs 10 to the power of 10 of the amount of energy we currently have, because the AI world requires huge resources. But so what is it? Well, it's the large private investments in green renewable energy that are solving this. Shell Oil with $15 billion into just research for infrastructure on renewables. These companies are being pressured to take to make the transition, to transform the infrastructure at a great loss to them, but with the enormous consumer pressure. But in our definition, we would definitely put like Shell oil on an ice floe and drive them off the face of the earth. But these corporations can make these enormous non-profitable shifts because of the massive amount of supply, infrastructure, and profit that they have stored away to keep their domination. And in order to keep domination is the focus of this investment, where a small renewable team can't make that investment. Neither can the governments afford it.
That's quite a shift. Like, you just blew my 17-year-old mind, because I was very identified as an activist, but even now I can feel like the little groupie places in me that are like, Shell is definitely evil. I can't, what? So yeah, I wasn't even aware I was doing that, but it lives in there. It's like very sort of dug in, like evil, good, bad, corporation, good.
Definitely. And I think there we have it again, this offense to our belief system. Mm-hmm. This sort of thing is super offensive. It's like, it's much easier, or I don't know, it seems so much more plausible, the story of the big evil corporations versus the poor good people, you know? But that's not true. And it's kind of coming out of hiding to see that you as a consumer, you do have agency, you do have power, you're not a victim. Like, stop it already. And that plays in all categories of life. And I think it's such an ask to grow up.
Totally. Like, it's such a, like, I see it in myself, like, oh, this is what maturing is. And it's seeing that my dad, who worked for Big Tobacco all his life, actually wasn't the enemy. So when we talk now, he's an incredibly pragmatic guy. And I'm like, oh my God, he makes so much sense. Maybe he was right all along.
I think what we're really boiling it all down to it, as Leela says, it's fear versus clarity. That's what we're really talking about. That's what is the heart of good versus evil. And the more we can experience our life without fear, the more which is there in the depth of this present moment, the more we can harness clarity and the polarity of life. Like, if we're really just up here in material form, we're bing bong, bing bong, bing bong against these polarities. But there's a depth to this moment, and it's right now, right here, and it's before those stories came in, and right there it's available for us to, well, recognize this allegiance to the fear in stepping over reality all the time. And honestly, decoders, I think all of you guys, like, you know, can be inspired by the kind of clarity that, you know, you're all starting to experience more and more and more, literally just tuning into our little play group here. Yeah.
The little play group solving age-old question of good and evil.
Look at us go.
But here we are, right, in this podcast, show after show, mapping this out, right? Contributing to a future where there's so much more clarity available in your mirror.
Yeah, and I would say the lived experience of dissolving good versus evil is one of tremendous freedom for me. Like, I wouldn't choose to go on any other journey. And then when you do feel inclined to act in clarity, you have the agency of source behind you. And that just has more impact than separate self could ever have. So it has more intelligence and ripples that you didn't even know about. And it doesn't mean that you're a Zen master. Quite the opposite. It makes life incredibly rich. and maybe you're reactive and maybe you make horrible mistakes. But it's also so okay. And also I feel like compassion grows by a million trillion. Like it's such a lived, felt, alive sense that everything is me, this, like us. It's just here. It's so intimate. And it breeds sensitivity and compassion and sometimes maybe a wider view. So sometimes my little sister will be like, how can you be so selfish and not go and visit my mom, or like not go and do what she says? And it's like, you have no idea the amount of compassion. Like in the big picture, there's nothing but love here. Like I could never, how could I harm someone that is me? Like it's not even possible. Like there's just so much love, even though externally it might look different. It might not sort of seem like the most compassionate way.
Should we do a podcast on all the ways compassion can make you act like an asshole?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
But
got so many examples.
I think there's just like a beautiful point though that you're saying, right? That when we have without having an allegiance to fear or to light, either or, it's amazing how much light just pours through because light's the dominant.
Amen, people. That's today's service for you.
The theme of our playgroup, Decoders, all of us here. Thanks for making time for our playgroup.
Light is the dominant. Let's end it there, guys.
Bye.
Talk to you next week. Bye.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening. We obviously love hearing what you think. Your feedback helps us make a better show for you to listen to. So feel free to comment, and you can do it at Facebook, which is the Humans Decoded podcast. And if you're not on social, you can always email any questions to us at outreach@kirantrace.com. And thanks for listening. We love you.